Africa here, from East Africa. I'm John Kalisa, I'm Senior Environment Economist. I'm here in Cape Town conversation. This is an interesting weekend conversation. So we are going to discuss about biodiversity conservation in the local community, balancing development and conservation in East Africa is becoming a challenge. So we kindly going to discuss with the panelists here I have. I would introduce Anita, Soina, environmentalist and founder, Soina Foundation from Kenya. Second is Hannah Bamwerinde, country lead, impact market. So I'll come here with 3 questions on biodiversity conservation in the local community. What kind of partnership can enforce equitable biodiversity agreement between state and local community disadvantage? I start with my next.
Thank you very much. As a young environmental advocate coming from a community that for a long time coexisted with wildlife, which is also biodiversity, I'd say one of the things that we need governments to do and is to really tap into indigenous knowledge that the community members do have, and incentivize the knowledge sharing so that the members of these communities who have the knowledge and really will want to pass on the knowledge to different generations find it interesting and find it benefiting for them. Otherwise, they just stay with the knowledge and then nothing on will happen. And another thing is to say that there needs to be establishment of partnerships between tech companies, governments, and NGOs to create specialized programs to provide infrastructure. And a very good example is I work with a tech company. It's called We Don't Have Time. And it works with governments, works with corporates to educate people all over the world, and not just one generation, but everybody. It brings together different sectors in the climate space. And of course, we know that by protecting our environment, we are protecting our biodiversity. So taking advantage of the digital aspects to pass the knowledge. Yeah.
Excellent. Maybe the next speaker.
Thank you so much. She has already touched on one point, but I think partnerships are needed on all levels. So we'll start with the government. It needs to be involved because, of course, decisions start from the top. So we need partnerships from government. We need government coming in and partnering directly with people on the grassroots. As people who work with people on the grassroots, we see many times when programs are brought and they're just imposed on people. So we need partnerships of government directly with grassroots. Then we also need to see the work that is being done and that is successful being amplified. Because when it comes to climate change, we have seen a lot of negative stories. But can we highlight some success stories and benchmark on them? What is working? And I think it's an important thing to really highlight that. So we need partnerships in broadcasting more on what is working. And also we need government partnerships to really push that enforcement, especially where we already have policies, but we need government to come in with that. We also need partnerships in terms of knowledge sharing. That's what she said. We have indigenous knowledge, but unfortunately, indigenous knowledge is theory. We don't have articles that are having that, and we also need where we have scientific research that is being done that backs up that indigenous knowledge. So we need training and amplifying. We need resources in order to have that indigenous knowledge working, because there's some indigenous knowledge that is outdated. So we also need partnerships in training, partnerships in government, and on all sectors. And we also need partnerships in funding some of the things that are already successful. Thank you.
Excellent. I think I'll bring another question. How can we facilitate technology transfer and knowledge sharing to enhance our infrastructure and access in geographically disadvantaged regions?
I think that's what we've just spoken into, if I'm not wrong. And it's just making sure that we are, when you say to the next generation, it means we as young people really understanding what worked for our parents, our great-grandparents, and for example, I engage in climate education, but when I go to the community, I do not teach the community, I learn from the community. So I think that's one thing that we really need to look at. And one of the things that communities in Kenya in the arid and semi-arid regions are doing, for example, they are practicing FMNR, which is farmer-managed natural regeneration. And we recently formed an alliance of young people called Friends of FMNR. Okay. And with necessary support, like my sister mentioned, financial support, technical support, capacity support, we were able to take young people to also get to borrow this knowledge from the community and from the older generation. And then that way, we come back and use digital media, for example, which I strongly use, to share this knowledge so that it can reach to other people, and together we can restore our degraded land, restore our degraded forest, just from what we learned from the community.
Yeah, maybe Hannah could add.
Yes, I also wanted to add another thing. When it comes to technology, unfortunately, technology was made with the mind of, I don't want to bring it back to the conversation, but it was made in mind with the Western world. So technology is not localized. So how can we localize technology? When it comes to these apps, how can they be put in local language? Can we have an app with indigenous knowledge? Can we have apps or technology that caters directly to local people? Because when we start with technology already by default, it does not favor the local people. So we need to start from there. How can technology be localized to help the local person? Then more to that, we need re-education around technology. When we go to grassroots networks and we're talking about technology, it seems very abstract to them. It's people that when they think about technology, it seems something very complicated. So how can we simplify? So if we're talking about transferring knowledge to the grassroots, then we need to simplify what technology is, re-educate people around technology so that they have a positive attitude towards technology. Because a lot of people have this, like when you talk about technology, people start to think of complicated things. So how can we re-educate people around that? Then that can help to create an ease towards technology, and also having all those things being localized, like to make sure that they favor grassroots. Because at the same time, if we come and impose technology that does not favor grassroots, it will not work. And how does that work with grassroots? Making sure that grassroots are always on the table when these conversations are being had. We need representatives from the grassroots. We need to involve them on the table, not just always imposing our ideas from the outside. We have seen a lot of stories. Everyone is familiar with the Batwa, who are in the famous, who are in the Bamwerinde, which is one of the most successful areas where conservation has taken place. The gorillas have multiplied in numbers, but people who were staying within the forest have been lost. And a lot of programs that were done for conservation towards these people were imposed on them, and so that's why they were not successful. So it goes back to how can we understand their needs before we impose on them, because we understand that without grassroots people being part of conservation, then we are wasting time. So we also need to bring them back to the table. What do they need in order to join the conversation? Thank you.
Excellent. I think I kept on conversation now. Good to know what is happening in East Africa, Kenya, Uganda. And I think one of the last questions I'll bring is, we have a diplomat here, different DPs here, different international. So what diplomatic effort can help address climate change impact on natural resource and promote biodiversity conservation in global South?
Well, I think the efforts that focus on forging global alliances that prioritize climate action, biodiversity conservation, but most importantly, the rights of the communities that engage in conservation. Because I think the moment we ignore the communities, then we lose, because literally they are the ones who engage in conservation, and real action happens on ground. It doesn't happen. Of course, we have meetings, we have the COPs and all that, but real action happens on ground. And for example, in my country, we are talking about 30% 30% forest cover in the next 9 years. And you can imagine if everybody is able to be at least at 30% in their own land, then as a country we surpass that. So I think it's understanding that, and also making sure that the partnerships that we have are beneficial to the community and not disadvantaging the communities, because I come from the Maasai community in Kenya, and they are one of the communities that have not benefited from conservation for a long time. We've had neocolonialism, and their land is being taken away for conservation, but then they do not benefit. They do not get the reward. So I think when we have partnerships and alliances that support also these communities financially, then it really gives them a go-ahead and a motivation for them to continue engaging in conservation.
Excellent. Yeah, the next.
Thank you. I had talked about one of the points, which is highlighting what is working. We need those. We need to really highlight what is working so that it gives hope, because a lot of people are losing hope. Then we also need to share opportunities about funding, at a higher level, because there are a lot of resources that are not being taken to the grassroots because there is no knowledge. So we need more of highlighting opportunities about funding. Then we also need to support grassroots networks directly. What is being done on the grassroots? So we need also action around that. Then we need more conversation about indigenous knowledge. How can it be published? How can we benchmark our indigenous knowledge, what is happening? For example, in Kenya can work better for Uganda by benchmarking on indigenous knowledge. Then last but not least, supporting research. We have seen that a lot of research has been done by outsiders and for different purposes, but I feel like we need more research, especially for local people and for indigenous knowledge to really understand what can work. So I would also advocate for more support on research and also awareness, especially because in Africa we have not really seen that. We have not been educated enough about the importance of research. So most of the decisions are made without enough knowledge about research. So I would trying to advocate for more research, because when we know what works, then we're able to save a lot of time that could be wasted from doing a lot of trials and errors. So at least research should be good, and of course indigenous knowledge, because when we go to communities with indigenous knowledge, it is always much easier for conservation to work, for them to understand this is not a new concept. Our ancestors were conserving way before us, and we're just, continuing. This is not a new concept. So for sure, I think if we invest more in indigenous knowledge and research, it would help us go a long way with the grassroots.
Very good.
Maybe
I think there's a question here
just,
from Cape Town. Yeah,
yeah, if I can
sure.
just add one last one, is that to summarize what she said, is like basically Afrocentric solutions may not, Eurocentric solutions may not work for Africa, so there's a need to focus on Afrocentric solutions, for example, in our continent. And also lastly, to say that when it comes to communities, let us not look at them as just victims of climate change, and let us remember that they are the stewards, and they are people who can carry these along, and they are the partners. They are the number one partners when we talk about partnerships here.
Excellent. I think it's good. We promote bottom-up development process.
Absolutely.
Focusing more on local community support.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you very much. This is a Cape Town conversation. Thank you.